The very mention of Hollywood's golden age conjures images of pure, unadulterated glamour. Imagine the dazzling gowns, the endless red carpets, and those picture-perfect smiles that became the very symbol of an entire generation. But beneath that flawless veneer lay a cesspool of secrets, festering with unspeakable betrayal, calculated cruelty, and bone-chilling fear. And amidst it all, one man, a figure renowned for his unshakable integrity and those unforgettable, piercing blue eyes, made a fateful decision. He chose to unleash the truth before the clock ran out on his life. That man was BURT Lancaster, an icon who had lived and breathed the very system he was about to expose. In the twilight of his years, he began to compile a document, a chilling account he ominously titled, "The Most Evil of Them All," a list so explosive it was destined to shatter the very foundation of how we perceive the legends of old Hollywood. He was the man who simply knew too much. BURT Lancaster was never just another face on the silver screen. Born November 2nd, 1913, in the heart of Manhattan, he was forged in the crucible of a working-class Irish-American family, where toughness and discipline were a way of life. His childhood unfolded on the gritty streets of East Harlem, an environment that chiseled his unyielding grit and fierce independence. Long before the Klieg ever found him, Lancaster was a death-defying circus acrobat, performing breathtaking stunts alongside his lifelong friend Nick Cravat in the K Brothers Circus. That treacherous experience, a constant dance with danger and a demand for absolute control, became a haunting metaphor for the life he was destined to lead, forever balancing on the razor-thin high wire of Hollywood's gilded yet treacherous illusion. Following his duty in World War II, Lancaster served honorably in the U.S. Army's Special Services Unit, entertaining troops across the war-torn landscapes of Europe. But upon his return home, destiny intervened with the force of a lightning bolt. A single chance audition catapulted him into the 1946 noir masterpiece, Asterisk. The Killer's Asterisk, and in the blink of an eye, he became an overnight sensation. In less than a decade, he had ascended to the ranks of Hollywood's most formidable power brokers, headlining legendary films like Times from Here to Eternity Asterisk, the unforgettable Times Elmer Gantry Asterisk, the gripping Times Birdman of Alcatraz Asterisk, and the monumental Times Judgment at Nuremberg Asterisk. Yet, Lancaster was so much more than a mere actor. He was a visionary producer, a profound thinker, and at his core, a fearless rebel. He boldly co-founded Hecht Hill Lancaster Productions, one of the very first truly independent studios to challenge the Hollywood machine, fiercely determined to create films that spoke raw, unfiltered truth rather than peddling the manufactured lies of the studio system. Away from the cameras, his voice thundered as an activist, bravely marching shoulder to shoulder with Martin Luther King, Jr., passionately opposing the Vietnam War and openly defying the terror of the McCarthy-era witch hunts. In the eyes of the world, he was nothing less than the moral compass of an often corrupt old Hollywood. And yet, as the relentless decades wore on, a profound bitterness began to poison Lancaster's soul. He had simply seen too much: the shadowy backroom deals, the soul-crushing abuse, the rampant corruption that festered just beneath the glittering facade. By the 1970s, with the golden age dimming into a distant, nostalgic memory, Lancaster began the solemn task of documenting every sordid detail he had ever witnessed. His ultimate purpose was not vengeance, but a desperate, final confession, a testament he chillingly named "The Most Evil of Them All." A deeply personal manuscript that listed a shocking 14 names of actors and actresses whom he was convinced had callously destroyed others for power. To him, these were not mere rumors. They were the indelible scars left upon his generation, the glittering masks of Hollywood. Lancaster's journal began with a chilling warning: not all smiles are kind. He desperately wanted readers to understand that the golden age was built as much on breathtaking cruelty as it was on dazzling charisma. His first, most devastating target was one of his own friends, Kirk Douglas, his co-star in Gunfight at the OK Corral and 7 Days in May. To the world, Douglas was the very image of strength, the proud rebel who fought studio, control, and brought Spartacus to life. But to Lancaster, he was a merciless titan, a man who absolutely thrived on domination. He accused Douglas of betraying co-stars to secure roles, viciously blacklisting rivals, and manipulating producers with a devastating charm. Lancaster even claimed Douglas would rip a role from his own son's hands if it meant another headline. Their professional partnership, once so celebrated, had long since curdled into a bitter poison of distrust. Then came Mickey Rooney, whom Lancaster venomously called The Mask of Mischief. Rooney, America's cherished on-screen boy next door, was described as an unbelievably cruel man behind closed doors, one who relentlessly mocked extras and humiliated young actresses purely for sport. Lancaster recalled, "The horror of watching him bully background performers during filming, turning entire sets into terrifying arenas of fear." Rooney's staggering 8 failed marriages, Lancaster wrote, were not bad luck, but a chilling pattern of control and heartless abandonment for a man so universally beloved by audiences. His private behavior, if true, revealed a profoundly darker truth. But Lancaster's merciless pen did not spare the women either. His most explosive entry was for Natalie Wood, whom he branded the Siren with a secret. To him, she wasn't the fragile and genuine soul that Hollywood worshipped, but a masterful manipulator of sympathy and influence. He claimed she wielded her emotions like deadly weapons, crying on perfect cue to get others ruthlessly fired or completely rewritten out of films. Her mysterious death in 1981 haunted Lancaster to his very core. He once confessed to a close friend, "The sea didn't take her, Hollywood did." In his mind, her terrible fate symbolized the ultimate price of deceit and ambition, in a gilded world that rewarded both. Next in his sights was Elizabeth Taylor, the Diamond Queen of drama. Lancaster described her as a tempest wrapped in silk, a force of nature capable of plunging entire productions into utter chaos. During the filming of Cleopatra in 1962, she infamously halted work for hours over a seemingly trivial wardrobe dispute. In Lancaster's eyes, Elizabeth Taylor's tumultuous marriages and public scandals weren't personal tragedies at all. They were a calculated arsenal. He chillingly wrote that she didn't just command the screen, she devoured souls. A devil hiding behind the gentleman's facade. After dissecting Taylor's reign, Lancaster aimed his poison pen at the Hollywood titans, whose public images were the very definition of virtue, but whose private conduct, he sensationally claimed, concealed a chilling, ruthless core. And the first legend he put in his crosshairs was none other than Spencer Tracy. The very same actor the critics practically deified for his profound depth, iron discipline, and stoic strength. But within the explosive pages of Lancaster's manuscript, Tracy was branded the tyrant lurking behind the towering talent. He painted a terrifying picture of an unpredictable storm, a man whose descent into alcoholism transformed him from a revered mentor into an absolute menace. Lancaster wrote that while Tracy could portray saints on the silver screen, he was a veritable devil in the confines of his dressing room. These volcanic rages, Lancaster alleged, were not mere personal demons. They were calculated weapons of sheer intimidation. Entire crews were paralyzed with fear, terrified of ever crossing him. Lancaster recounted one horrifying incident from 1961 during the production of Judgment at Nuremberg, where Tracy allegedly shattered a glass bottle in a blind rage over a trivial mistake made by a trembling makeup artist. While the public excused these eruptions as the tragic outbursts of a tortured genius, Lancaster saw nothing but the devastating trail of fear they left in their wake. Lancaster declared, "He didn't just demolish sets, he utterly demolished people." From there, the manuscript's accusations turned to James Stewart, an inclusion so stunning it was perhaps the most shocking of all. After all, Stewart was America's unwavering moral compass, the very soul of decency embodied in films like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and It's a Wonderful Life. And yet, Lancaster branded him the dark heart of America's sweetheart. He wrote that while Stewart beamed for the cameras, he was silently judging everyone behind them. According to Lancaster's exposé, Stewart's beloved, kind persona was nothing more than a meticulously crafted performance, a chilling tool used to maintain absolute control and command respect. Lancaster leveled a shocking accusation that Stewart secretly documented his co-stars' every mistake, delivering these notes directly to directors. It was a quiet, insidious sabotage, all masterfully disguised as the utmost professionalism. But even more disturbing, Lancaster hinted that Stewart's celebrated patriotism concealed a sinister shadow side, a deeply ingrained prejudice that quietly ensured certain actors were never welcome on his sets. Then, his focus shifted to Marilyn Monroe, whom he called the angel of addiction. To the entire world, she was the very picture of vulnerability, a wounded goddess whose fragility made men desperately want to protect her. But Lancaster claimed to see something far more sinister: cold, hard manipulation. He alleged that Monroe expertly weaponized her fragility as leverage, deliberately delaying productions, ensnaring powerful men, and masterfully playing the helpless victim to maintain ultimate control. During the filming of Some Like It Hot, he wrote, She would vanish from the set for hours on end, leaving the entire cast and crew waiting in agonizing suspense. As Lancaster pointedly noted, she wasn't crying for help. She had practically summoned her own demise. For him, her tragic passing was no mystery at all, but the catastrophic, unavoidable finale to a life utterly consumed by dependency and deceit. It was the heartbreaking final act for a woman Hollywood had meticulously crafted, only to then utterly shatter. Following the legacy of cruelty left in the wake of Monroe's fragile chaos, Lancaster's journal plunged into even darker territory, a place where the glamorous masks of Hollywood's most celebrated leading men were violently torn away. The very next name was the legendary Errol Flynn, the man who had once been the living, breathing definition of adventure itself. To the adoring public, Flynn was the impossibly dashing rogue from The Adventures of Robin Hood and Captain Blood, a glorious symbol of untamed charisma and boundless freedom. But in Lancaster's chilling account, he was something else entirely. He was a devil-may-care desperado, a truly charming sociopath dressed in the guise of a swashbuckling pirate. Lancaster painted a horrifying picture of the parties Flynn hosted, describing them as nothing short of dens of utter indulgence, nightmarish places where violence, exploitation, and raw fear all bled into one terrifying spectacle. He wrote that Flynn moved through the world as if no one else truly existed, his legendary charm, a potent weapon that lured unsuspecting souls close, only to leave them utterly broken in his wake. Flynn's staggering list of arrests, his whispered and sordid scandals, and his uncanny ability to constantly escape justice became, in Lancaster's mind, undeniable proof that the immense power wielded in Hollywood could shield even the most monstrous behavior from consequence. He branded him a man utterly without consequence, someone who masterfully turned sin into a public spectacle and laughed all the way through it. From the debauchery of Flynn, the story twisted toward the domestic and became somehow even more chilling. Lancaster then turned his poison pen to the beloved Bing Crosby, labeling him the crooner of cruelty. This gentle-voiced singer who had serenaded millions with White Christmas was, in Lancaster's damning assessment, a man made of pure ice. Away from the microphone, he was a tyrant in his own home. Lancaster detailed the horrific reality of how Crosby's own children were forced to live under a constant cloud of fear, where his brutal discipline crossed the line into unspeakable cruelty. He could sing a lullaby to the entire world, Lancaster wrote, and simultaneously strike terror into the hearts of his own family. Decades later, a terrible validation would come when Crosby's eldest son, Gary Crosby, confirmed these horrifying rumors in his own memoir, describing years of soul-crushing emotional and physical torment. For Lancaster, this confession was the ultimate proof of Hollywood's staggering hypocrisy, that the very men who sang the world's greatest love songs were often complete and utter strangers to it themselves. But the horror, unbelievably, didn't stop there. Lancaster then added Gary himself to this wretched list, branding him the inheritor of darkness. Having been raised under the crushing weight of terror, Gary grew into a man doomed to repeat his father's monstrous sins. He didn't just carry the scars, Lancaster chillingly observed. He carried the rage. His adult life spiraled into a catastrophic storm of addiction, brutal violence, and relentless self-destruction. To Lancaster, Gary was a heartbreaking, living testament to the devastating power of inherited cruelty, a tragic symbol of a cursed legacy. He was undeniable proof that pain, once planted, never truly dies. Instead, it grows deep, insidious roots and spreads its poison from fathers to sons, cascading through the generations. In Lancaster's own words, Hollywood wasn't just in the business of making stars, it was also a factory for monsters. And sometimes, the most terrifying ones were created right at home. The cold hearts of Hollywood. After laying bare the brutal legacy of the Crosbys, Lancaster turned his piercing gaze toward an entirely different, more insidious form of cruelty, the kind that was quiet, invisible, and all the more damaging for it. He began with Henry Fonda, a man long revered as the very moral face of American cinema. To millions of adoring fans, Fonda represented the pinnacle of integrity, the noble father figure of The Grapes of Wrath, and the righteous juror in 12 Angry Men. But the portrait Lancaster painted was utterly chilling. He claimed Fonda treated life itself like a courtroom, one where he was the cold, judgmental, and perpetually silent judge. Lancaster saw Fonda's legendary stillness not as calm, but as a terrifying form of control. On the set, he was celebrated for his discipline and composure, but at home, that very same composure allegedly hardened into a wall of emotional ice. His children, Jane and Peter, grew up in the immense, cold shadow of a man who was profoundly distant, utterly unreachable, and tragically impossible to please. He passed judgment with a single glance, Lancaster wrote, and those who loved him most simply froze beneath it. Jane Fonda herself would later confirm the heartbreaking essence of this, admitting that her father's love always had to be earned, a devastating sentiment that mirrored Lancaster's assessment precisely. To him, Fonda's stoicism was no virtue. It was emotional cruelty masterfully masquerading as dignity. But what disturbed Lancaster even more was Jane Fonda herself, for she was the daughter who had inherited both her father's raging fire and his soul-crushing frost. In his notes, he gave her a chilling moniker, the revolutionary with a ruthless streak. He believed Jane's fervent activism, her public defiance, and her celebrated outspokenness stemmed not from compassion but from an insatiable need for control. She fought for causes, he wrote, but she also fought for absolute dominance. Lancaster leveled the stunning accusation that she used her fame and political voice as weapons, turning every platform into a stage where she alone decided who was righteous and who stood condemned. He once confessed to a confidant that Jane could be disarmingly warm one hour and terrifyingly ice-cold the next, a volatile pattern that hauntedly echoed her father's detached intensity. Next on the list was a name that inspired a unique kind of terror in Hollywood lore, Joan Crawford. He called her the Iron Matriarch, a force of nature lurking behind the glamorous persona of a perfectionist star. It was, in his own chilling words, a woman who ruled through absolute fear. Lancaster alleged she unleashed a reign of terror upon younger actresses, brutally mistreated her assistants, and masterfully manipulated anyone who dared to defy her. Her home, he penned, was a veritable palace of rigid discipline, a place where not even her own children were safe from her wrath. She governed with a mere arch of her eyebrow and the clench of her fists, he declared, years before Christina Crawford's bombshell memoir, Mommy Dearest, would shockingly corroborate so many of these very same accusations. To Lancaster, Joan wasn't simply an abuser. She was the living, breathing embodiment of Hollywood's deepest sickness, absolute power devoid of a single shred of empathy. He wrote that she discovered early on that control was the only path to survival, but in her desperate quest to survive, she utterly destroyed everyone in her path. The final, earth-shattering confession, the last name scrawled in BURT Lancaster's secret manuscript, was a name that sent shockwaves through even his most intimate circle of friends, Lucille Ball, America's eternal sweetheart of comedy. To countless millions, she was the fiery, red-haired genius, the very soul of I Love Lucy, the woman who single-handedly brought joy back into post-war America. But in Lancaster's damning account, she was nothing less than the queen of control. He claimed that behind that infectious laughter lurked a cold, calculating, and ruthless ruler, one who commanded her studio, Desilu Productions, as if it were her own private, impenetrable empire. According to Lancaster's stunning exposé, Ball micromanaged every conceivable detail, from the writer's sacred lunch breaks to the precise timing of a simple door knock during rehearsals. She didn't just want to be funny, he wrote, she demanded to own every sound, every breath, every single movement. He painted a chilling picture of a boss who meticulously tracked her employees' every misstep in a secret notebook, punishing any repeated offense with swift and merciless dismissal. One harrowing story recounted how she demanded a script be completely rewritten overnight, only to contemptuously throw it in the writer's face the very next morning and let out a chilling laugh. That laugh saved CBS, Lancaster wrote, but it absolutely crushed the souls of those who toiled beneath her. He even made the shocking allegation that she installed hidden microphones in meeting rooms to spy on the loyalty of her staff, a stunning claim, impossible to ever truly verify, but utterly bone-chilling in its implications. To Lancaster, Lucille Ball was the ultimate, undeniable truth of the Golden Age, that beneath all the glittering smiles were men and women forged in the fires of fear, addiction, ego, and an insatiable need for control. He concluded his devastating list not with rage, but with a profound sense of exhaustion. We built a city of dreams, he wrote, but its very foundations were laid upon the sins that absolutely no one wanted to acknowledge. In the tragic years that followed, BURT Lancaster's formidable health began to catastrophically fail. He suffered a series of debilitating heart attacks, underwent emergency bypass surgery in 1983, and finally endured a devastating stroke in 1990 that left him tragically, partially paralyzed, and cruelly robbed him of his magnificent speech. For a man whose voice had once thundered through theaters with such fire, that profound silence was the most heart-wrenching and cruelest of punishments. He retreated from the world, spending his final, agonizing years in utter seclusion, with only his devoted wife, Susan Martin, by his side, until his tragic passing on October 20th, 1994, at the solemn age of 80. And that manuscript, the most damning and evil of them all, was shockingly never published. If it even still exists, it's rumored to be locked away, buried deep within some shadowy private archive, gathering dust, a ticking time bomb just waiting for the day Hollywood finally dares to confront its darkest ghosts. Was it a final act of vengeance, a soul-bearing confession, or a desperate cry for truth? The world may never truly know, but his words, seared into the memory of the few who read them, echo one haunting, inescapable message. We were all complicit. The blinding glare of fame made us ignore the evil festering in our midst, even when it stared back at us from our own mirrors. So now the question falls to you: was BURT Lancaster a courageous truth-teller, or merely a bitter man lashing out at a cruel and unforgiving industry? Which name on that explosive list sent the biggest shockwave through you? We desperately want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more earth-shattering, untold stories from the darkest corners of Hollywood's hidden past.